All right, well, welcome everybody. I'm glad to have everybody back today. We have a lot of information to cover, a lot of sharing to do. This is session 2. I just want to get started by just reminding everybody kind of what we did during our last session last week. We talked a little bit about the learning collaborative process. We did introductions of everybody. We talked a little bit about the difference between evaluation and performance management and how we're really kind of melding those two together as a part of this discussion because everybody's in a different place. We talked about the purpose of an evaluation. We just barely started talking about stakeholders. It gave everybody some homework to identify a SHIP area goal or focus areas for your work as a part of this learning collaborative. Forward from there. As a reminder, these are our learning collaborative participants, so we're going to be hearing from everybody today. And if you do have a camera and you can join us, please do that. Just as a reminder, if you do have internet challenges, then don't use the video because that takes up a lot of bandwidth. And also to have your phones on mute. That really helps everybody. But the lines are open. So if you can put your phones on mute or your computer on mute, that will help just kind of with
Rochelle,
that,
I just want to share that you're not sharing your presentation at this point.
I'm not?
No.
All right. Why would that be? Let's see. Let me see what's going on here. All right. Now do you see it?
Yep, we see it now.
Okay, great. Sorry about that, everybody. Thank you for interrupting me. It's always helpful. So here is everybody who is participating. And as you can see, we added Harold, who is from Arkansas, who just introduced himself. So we are just going to move forward today. So this session 2, we're going to continue with a little bit of evaluation overview. And we're going to go back and talk about engaging stakeholders. We're going to talk about setting goals and answering questions. We're going to talk about getting some, putting together some SMART objectives. And if we're lucky, we're going to move on to creating measures. Highly doubt it, but we'll see how far we can get. I think that most everybody submitted your evaluation goals to me and what questions you'd like to answer as a part of your SHIP programs, and all of that really fits into today's discussion. So that worked out really well in terms of kind of setting the stage for some of these conversations that we're going to have today, and hopefully you'll get some clarification in terms of a lot of the questions that you had in terms of answering some of those questions. Just as a reminder, from our last session, the purpose of an evaluation is to understand and increase the impact of the program that we're working on. So SHIP, some of you are heavier in flex, but regardless, improve your program efficiency and effectiveness, validate your program and activity intent, enhance program reporting, support your planning, management, and implementation, really to create a process so that you can do program revisions on the fly, and then also to improve program engagement. So all of the steps that we're going to be talking about today really connect back to this purpose of a program evaluation. Before we kind of just dive in and get started today, I wanted to put this in front of you, which you likely saw in the SHIP program evaluation guide. And this is really kind of the format that we're going to follow today in terms of talking about evaluation, talking about your goals, objectives, creating measures, collecting data, using those measures, and then eventually showing an impact. I put the stakeholders piece along the side because that is a constant part of this whole process. And as we talk about developing your plans, building your objectives, etc., you'll see where stakeholders can fit into that process. Now, one thing I'm going to note is that as we're working right now as a part of this collaborative, we aren't going to be engaging stakeholders. You could on the back end if the time permits and if it fits into your kind of program development process. But right now, we're going to talk about inclusion of stakeholders in the evaluation process. But as we're building kind of, I'm going to consider it almost a mock evaluation plan as a part of this, you won't have the time, most likely you won't have the time to build stakeholders into it. So keep that in mind as we work through this process, because it is definitely an important part of the whole process. All right, so we have several steps that we're going to walk through today. I think I've got 5 steps for us to walk through. And some of this first step is just kind of a foundational piece in terms of evaluation work, but it's a part that came up a lot during the last collaborative, and it also was quite evident during the questions and comments that everybody submitted as a part of creating goals for your SHIP program. And before you can do really any evaluation work, an important piece to be able to do this is to actually understand what is your SHIP program. And there's a lot of pieces to understanding it. You need to know what you're doing. You need to understand kind of who's involved. Some of us sitting around the table are newer to SHIP. And so you might not be as familiar with the hospitals, kind of what their situations are. Are they in a system? Are they outside of a system? You may not be as familiar with contractors. During the last collaborative, we had a couple of folks that knew their program was working with contractors, but they weren't exactly sure who those contractors were, whether they were a part of SHIP, whether they were a part of Flex. There's lots of confusion in terms of kind of who was doing what. Another good piece is understanding kind of the why. Why are you focusing on these particular areas? Why are you focusing on age caps if that's the part that you're focusing on? If you're focusing on value-based purchasing, why are you doing that? The where are you doing your work in terms of hospitals, the workshops, the vendors, you know, really understanding your program is a definite first step, because especially if you're new coming in and you weren't on the development side, it's really hard to get started and to start creating any goals if you don't know much about your program at all. Then you're really just kind of shooting in the dark, and it'll be even more difficult to get any kind of stakeholder involvement as a part of this process. So first you need to understand what your SHIP program is. And through that, you will be able to start building your evaluation plans. Now, I know everybody's at a different place, but this is in the comments that came back to me during the last week. I would say about 50% of our programs are still in this understanding what the SHIP program is mode. And if you happen to be in that place, it's fine. When we work on our one-on-ones, I will provide some guidance to you directly just based on your understanding in terms of how you can move forward with developing your understanding, but then even to take the next step to start working on the rest of, to actually start working on evaluation planning. Does anybody have any questions about this understanding piece? Does anybody have any challenges understanding your program? Any barriers that you've run into?
This is Penny from Wisconsin. This comment isn't specific to SHIP, it was actually about Flex, but just a meeting this morning with staff and emphasizing the importance of documentation and tracking and some kind of regular updates or status or some kind of, it all revolved around documentation. And mostly it was for kind of that situation of, you know, you get hit by the bus and somebody else has to step in and needs to understand your program and what's going on and where things are going. So, you know, when all of it's in your head and you know it really well, that there's some value in that, but there's even more value in the documentation of these things so that other people, your boss or the new coordinator or staff that you're bringing on, have a better chance of understanding your program.
That is a really good point, Penny. And in fact, I know that I only got a snapshot from programs when everybody submitted background work before the whole Learning Collaborative started. But one of the things that I noted as an outside person, and we'll talk about this again on the one-on-ones, but one of the things that I noted is with some of what I got, I couldn't tell anything about what the program is actually doing. And having that documentation of your program, not only will it help you remember and be able to track things over time, but as Penny said, it does allow other people to step in and pick things up should something change. Sometimes, big things happen in people's lives, but also if 10 years down the road, if somebody wants to look back and say, hey, did we try that already? For some reason, I feel like we've already tried it and X, Y, and Z happened. Having that documentation can really help in terms of thinking about why something did work and why it didn't work and what it was that was happening at that time. So I think the reporting piece to FORHP can sometimes seem burdensome, but in the end, it can actually be really, really helpful if we've got good documentation.
Rochelle, can you hear me?
I can. Go ahead, Kyle.
So one of the things that was on my personal PMI, my performance management for last year, was a desk manual for SHIP. So that was one of the things that I had to do for my performance, for my individual performance here at the state, was to create, and it's exactly what Penny was talking about, a desk manual so that if something were to happen and somebody else needed to step in, they could just look at that desk manual and go, okay, these were the things that were happening. These are the processes that are in place to meet the SHIP objectives, and this is the internal things that have to get done. So it was a desk manual and it was included on my PMI.
That is terrific. So just a note to Kiona at Task, that might be an opportunity for Task in the future if there are SHIP programs creating those, to get a template out there for folks, or even for somebody like Kyle, Penny. I don't know if you guys are working on that in-house too, but for folks to be able to work or to share what they've developed, because being able to start from something just will help everybody else as well.
Hey, Rochelle?
Yes, go ahead.
Hey, this is Harold. Hey, you mentioned something about barriers. Well, here, one of the barriers that I'm dealing with here with my SHIP hospitals is that a lot of the hospitals have a high turnover rate. So I'm constantly, the new person, the new SHIP coordinator with the hospital, I'm in, they'll call me. So I'm constantly having to give them information and give the hospitals information over and over again because of the high turnover rate. And so a lot of them, even when they get their foot, on the ground and understanding the SHIP process, then they'll leave and then somebody else will come along. I don't know if any of the other hospitals are having issues with that particular problem.
Yeah, Harold, I think that's probably a pretty common issue. And if that's an issue for all of you and something that you want to be able to address, because when we talk about some of our objectives, we could build some options. We can build some activities and develop your program and evaluation to try and target that. I think that one of the strategies that a number of folks have used, because that's kind of a common issue across all of our teams within critical access hospitals and even our small rural hospitals in general, is to engage more people. So if you're doing a training, try and ask folks to bring a team to the table. That way, if you lose one, you might have somebody else on the team who can step up and pick it up. But definitely using a team approach to training within your hospitals is going to be your better bet versus just having one single person. I think we had a comment from somebody here in the chat. Okay, looks like it's the same thing. All right. Anybody else who wants to chime in on this?
This is Danette. I have a couple things to say.
Go ahead, Danette.
I had suggested the same thing as what Kyle just mentioned. When we lost our director, and then we formed a grant committee, and then things completely changed. So this was like 2 years ago. And to my surprise and consternation, the CEO said, "We don't need anything like that. We don't need to know." I'm like, okay. So instead, what I do is I collaborate with my finance director and with my hospital director, so they always know what's going on with the SHIP grant. The three of us work together. I copy them on anything I'm doing as far as the grant plan and the activities, because we use a network model, and then they're kept informed along the way, so they could literally step in. And this week I had a good example. My boss stepped in and provided data for our department who does the annual report. My boss went to my files and got all my data and gave it to him because she knew I was busy. So that was my exciting moment, because I knew then that, you know, the others had connected. And then my finance director designed a cover sheet for our contracts. So her purpose was for each of us to know and understand our contracts better, so that we don't just sign a contract and put it in the drawer, and you know, we don't know what's going on with it. So that was a process that really enhanced overall the whole organization, for Flex, SHIP, anything that's going on. So those are some of the things that we have in place.
Great, thank you. Thanks so much. And just so everybody knows, that's Danette from Colorado. If others have other ideas, put them in the chat box, because Kiona will send the chat box out to everybody so that you can see those as well. And then if you have any other challenges, just jot those down, because then when we meet one-on-one, we can tackle those as well. We are going to move on just because of time, but understanding your SHIP program is really a foundational piece in order to get started. All right, so one of the things that I did was went through all of your SHIP materials that were submitted. A couple of you may have submitted them, but I didn't get them so that they're not included. But I did go through and just kind of put in some highlights based on kind of what I saw in the materials of kind of who's doing what. This kind of gets to an item that Penny was talking about during our last collaborative session, or our first one, and just kind of who's doing what as a part of all of the different SHIP programs around the country. I put the number of hospitals in the far left-hand side. I believe that number represents not the number of hospitals that are eligible to participate in SHIP, but the number of hospitals that are participating in SHIP. It seemed like a pretty good split between hospitals that are using cohorts or groups of hospitals working on initiatives, whether it's lean or training or kind of program development, quality improvement work. Then there's, you know, others who are giving funding directly to the hospitals. They may be operating within a cohort type of environment as well. Less likely to be in that position. A number of you are funneling funding through contracts to vendors who are basically kind of implementing your SHIP programs. And then some of you are funding all the vast majority of your funding directly to the small rural hospitals who are working on initiatives themselves. So as you can tell, as I was reviewing or looking through the various plans that were submitted, there were some that were definitely more clear than others, and were really easy to review. Part of that had to do with the different materials that were sent. Trying to, if you know what's reflected in here doesn't reflect or isn't reflective of what was actually in your materials, that could be an indication. I'm not saying it is, but it could be an indication that what's in the materials isn't really clear to begin with. So take a look at this. If you have, if there's anything that's on here in terms of you're looking for some of your own internal program revision, you can feel free to reach out to anybody on the collaborative to ask folks kind of what that is, what you're doing. You'll learn a little bit more as we kind of talk about the evaluation steps as a part of this process, but we are not going to dig into every one of the programs and what everybody's doing, only because of a time issue. But feel free to reach out to folks if there's something in here that people are doing that you would like to have more information on. I think you could also reach out to the folks at Task. They're always looking to be able to share, and if there's something in particular as a part of this learning collaborative where you'd like to learn more about an activity that's taking place in a particular state, that might be something that's of interest to all states, and so it could be something that's on a Task webinar that they feature. Does anybody just kind of off the top have any questions about what's in the table here? I know, Penny, you had some questions about kind of who's doing what at the very beginning.
Yeah, this is great. I'm super excited about this. I maybe don't understand the different columns because they're all under focus area. So it was just like, if let's say Mississippi or Iowa, because they have the most. So the columns don't necessarily correspond to each other so much as each column is a new topic.
Exactly. Okay. And so the challenge that I ran into was that as I was looking across things, I originally started classifying everything by, you know, ACO development, value-based purchasing, blah, blah. But just because somebody put it in value-based purchasing didn't mean it belonged in value-based purchasing. And so the more I started working on it, the less value those titles actually have.
Makes sense.
Okay, and if anybody has any questions, just feel to reach out, but we'll revisit some of this during our individual one-on-ones. All right, so we're going to move forward in terms of the framework for planning and developing your evaluation and your plan. The framework that I'm going to use is going to really rely on a logic model or a roadmap. You can call it whatever you want. If not familiar with logic models, I highly encourage you to go out onto YouTube, do a little Googling around or searching on YouTube. You'll find a million videos that talk about logic models. It can, you know, if there's not a specific one, I put one in here in case you're not familiar. The reason why I like this model, and the name itself always I think is confusing for people, is it really kind of lays out all of the different elements that are really needed to lay the initial kind of foundational pieces of performance management. It's all about kind of taking what you're doing and all of the activities, and then identifying kind of your outputs and outcomes and everything as a part of that process. So it's a flow. We're going to be kind of using this. It's not going to be front and center, but know that that's kind of what we're going to be using. This is another kind of look at the same thing. Again, Both of these two you will also see in the SHIP evaluation guide if you haven't looked at that. Again, just kind of inputs and process, the activities that you're doing, and then really kind of looking at outcomes and outputs using data, and then doing some performance management based on that data that you have collected. So we're going to be using these frameworks as we talk today and as we build our plan, but this is the primary framework that I'm going to be using as we kind of explore developing our SHIP evaluation plans. This is the process that we're going to be using. We've already talked about goals a little bit. We're going to go back now into goals, and then we're going to kind of flow down this whole process in terms of goals, objectives, measures, collecting data, using the data, and then showing an impact.
Rochelle?
Yes.
This is Penny. Can I be a pain in your hiney real quick?
No pains.
Well, I'll try harder then. Can you go back 2 slides to the logic model idea? Because I just keep getting stuck on the fact that the activities for this particular grant are by and large purchases. They purchase the software. They purchase the training, or they purchase the whatever. It's, you know what I mean? It's an individual purchase. They purchase the renewal to a subscription to a vendor kind of a thing. And so, I mean, I don't want to overthink things, which I do tend to do, but I need to keep putting on my like feasibility hat, and what kind of outcomes can we actually expect from purchases. And I know that's not what everybody does, but you know, a large majority of states, that's what their SHIP money goes to, is it goes, you know, straight to hospital, maybe individual hospitals who make purchases from the allowable purchase list. So yeah, so when you have this up here, I keep thinking like specifically for SHIP, what kind of outcomes can we expect? And I think the short term, at least for those purchases, is going to be what's most realistic for us to look at least in Wisconsin. I'm not trying to tell anybody else what they are. Anyway, thank you. Thanks for letting me.
It's okay. And I think a lot of people kind of swim around in that in that place. So there's going to be a couple of ways that we can that we're going to target that in terms of really thinking about evaluation. One will be our priorities. And 2, even though the funding is maybe going to individual hospitals to do individual purchases, it doesn't mean that we don't need to evaluate whether those purchases have resulted into any short, intermediate, or long-term outcomes. That may not be the priority in terms of where you want to focus your attention, but there are some steps that you can take in order to get to that place. So we'll talk about that. We'll build it in there, but it's definitely, I think, a place where a lot of people kind of end up swimming. And I don't want us to get caught there because you can identify what your priorities are as well, and then use those to kind of drive your evaluation forward.
Thank you. Thanks for validating me.
Stephanie says that she struggles with that as well. And then Danette commented, we have activities that are true projects. It's really thinking about the purpose of the purchase. That's where the outcome can be. Oh,
yeah, and can I just say one thing? I think part of my challenge is having the hospitals do that, not necessarily the SHIP coordinator, right? So they make that purchase, and then trying to get them to go from I make a purchase for an HCAPS vendor to it really truly changed my outcomes, because it doesn't unless you do some work on it. But the work on it isn't what you're paying for with SHIP. SHIP's paying for the vendor, right? So I think it's just trying to think through that, and that's exactly where I get stuck all the time. I think that's what I put to you in my questions, is just like this, the data that I get back is not, because we don't ask them for that, right? We want to know, where are you putting your, you know, what is your menu selection? What is the category? And to get any kind of meat and potatoes from something from SHIP, if you're doing even like whether it's a collaborative or an individual hospital. So not to belabor it, but you are not alone, Penny. And I would really hope that at some point we can kind of dig into that a little bit, because I do think that's really important.
Yep, and we will definitely dig into that. And in fact, we will talk about those specifics because anybody that's doing this individual work, you're going to have some of those specifics, and we can dig into those specifics when we talk one-on-one, and try and get to the bottom of being able to actually measure some of that. All right, so again, here's the process that we're going to be working through. We are going to talk first about stakeholder buy-in. And in fact, what you just said, Stephanie, actually has quite a bit to do with stakeholder buy-in. We just started talking a little bit about this piece of the evaluation. And you know, this doesn't matter. This, regardless of what program we're talking about, stakeholder buy-in is going to support you in basically doing all of your work, including your evaluation, and communicating with stakeholders so that they know what and why SHIP is in place, and getting their input related to your evaluation, what you're trying to achieve, making sure that when you set up your objectives and that when you set up your measures, that those align with what is actually achievable. And you can get that input directly from stakeholders. One thing I'm going to say, just kind of as a backdrop to all of this, that is probably quite obvious, but I'm going to say it as what regardless, is that evaluation, it does take time. And so as we talk today, you're going to notice, and maybe some of you are going to be like, oh my gosh, we do not have time for this. Well, you know, I know that everybody's stretched pretty thin, and, you know, even when we did introductions last week, everybody wears a lot of hats. You're kind of like the folks in critical access hospitals or small rural hospitals that, you know, you're wearing a lot of hats. So, you know, building your evaluation or even engaging stakeholders is just one more thing to do. However, once you do that, once the stakeholders start to get on board and understand things, and you build them into your needs assessments, your program planning, your evaluation work, you're going to see them move along much easier. They will want to be on board. They will participate because they've been engaged they've been fully engaged in the process, and they understand why. And one of the principles that I always use basically for everything in life is to take the path of least resistance. Sometimes we have to take the other path, but as you're getting started and building your evaluation work, I wouldn't hesitate doing that path of least resistance. And again, even focusing in the areas where you know that you're going to have successes. Sure, you know, maybe you should be focusing in other areas because of program needs, etc. But you want to be able to get some of this under your feet and developed and going, which then it almost becomes, it manages itself a little bit better so that you can then go back and start building on those other pieces as well. But the stakeholder buy-in piece is a really, really big one. When you think about the stakeholders, it's you and it's everybody who's involved. It could be your other team members that we talked about in terms of understanding your program. It could be hospitals. It's going to be any of the folks that you work with, your vendors, etc. You really want to engage people and build and have them understand what you're doing. When you're doing evaluation, if you've got stakeholder involvement, they know why they're getting asked for information. They'll be more committed to your evaluation process. They're more likely to respond to things or send things back. They will be more likely to use the findings that you have. If you need to make program changes because something's not working, they'll understand it because they will have received the findings. They'll know what you're trying to accomplish. And it also increases the credibility of your findings because all the people have been on board. If you don't include stakeholders, you may be developing an evaluation that isn't really going to respond to what can happen through this program, especially if you've got those, Penny, you were talking about those individual grants that are going out. Well, if you're trying to measure something that the hospitals aren't actually even trying to achieve, your evaluation is completely out of alignment with reality. So engaging them on the front end is really going to make a big difference in terms of what you can measure, how you can measure it, and who's actually going to participate in any reporting that you need as a part of your program. Here are just some stakeholder questions in terms of inclusions. And here are some ideas in terms of how you can actually engage stakeholders. So you can host some evaluation program webinars. I know some of you have regular SHIP webinars. I think I saw a few of you are hosting like quarterly meetings, discussions. If you've got a workshop that you're doing, a training, you can build the discussion onto the front end in terms of, you know, this is what we're planning to achieve as a part of this. Is this realistic? Is this something that we can work towards, or should we be changing this as a part of this process? The other thing that I should note is, since a lot of you contract the work out to other organizations, you shouldn't see that all of this data collection, etc., falls all on you. I am a huge advocate of stating that vendors, they actually work for you. And so you can build evaluation and accountability into those vendor contracts. I know it can seem tough. I know it can seem like, why would my vendor want to report this back to me? Well, you know, they're working for you. You're not working for them. And so building this piece into those contracts will definitely be a benefit to you and to your program, and even just for reporting purposes. If you're getting data in the way that you need it, you're going to be able to analyze it and use that data a lot easier than if you're getting it in formats that makes you sort the data, kind of figure out who's doing what. It should be going to you in a fairly structured, easy to manage way. Let's see, a couple of people commented on here. It looks like Danette talked about, if you didn't see in the chat, Danette has a kickoff flyer. Danette, you want to talk about your kickoff flyer? Danette's made for those of you that, or Harold, you weren't on the last webinar, but Danette was on our last year's evaluation collaborative, and so Danette's developed a lot of stuff. I'm actually going to be sharing some of Danette's stuff with everybody so you can see some of the work that she's done. It's really impressive. But Danette, will you talk about your kickoff flyer that you use?
Sure. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we can.
Okay. Well, just so everybody knows, I've struggled with all of this stuff for the last 10 years and worked through it, you know, piece by piece every year, trying to do improvements. So what I have come to is using the kickoff flyers. On the HCAPS flyer, on one side, it gives a suggestion of a process where their accounts payable department can copy the invoice and check stub when they pay the invoice and send that to me, and that's worked well. We've got that engagement with most of the hospitals. The ones that don't have are still in the hands of either the SHIP project director or the quality director for the hospital. Doing this has actually helped me with a couple hospitals that are part of large systems, and which previously was a problem getting things done. And now they're all engaged, and the large system people are being very helpful. So the process for, you know, collaboration within the hospital to get those invoices to me is documented on one side of the flyer. On the second page of the flyer, I talk about what's the purpose of HCAPS. Why does SHIP want, you know, hospitals involved in HCAPS when there is a threshold and their data won't be seen in hospital compare. And so in that aspect, I collaborate with our Flex program manager, and we help them understand, you know, the basics of it. And then I have a little tiny template that says what HCAPS measures or HCAPS scores are you working on for improvement? How are you gathering that data? How are you making those improvements? It's maybe 4 or 5 lines. And anytime I follow up with somebody because they've missed a deadline, I just send them a copy of the flyer and remind them, you know, keep it simple. You don't have to write a book, just, you know, tell your story. And I basically have a flyer like that for each activity. Like we do Charge Master, so they're working with consultants, and then they have the project charter to go with that. And it just helps them walk through the steps of what we want to collect. So we want to see their action plan for their Charge Master project. Well, that's part of the project plan. So as they step through the project plan, they see, you know, what they need to report or answer. And by the time they get done, those documents have helped them provide their progress report to me. So that's really been helpful to me. The flyers, I probably started a couple, maybe 3 or 4 years ago. And the project plans I started last year, and I'm tweaking those. And this year I'm adding a timeline so that they have all of that to know exactly what they're doing, when they're doing it, and when it's due to me.
Awesome. And Danette, you're fine sharing that with everybody?
Yeah.
Perfect. Awesome. So Danette lays out what she's doing from a stakeholder engagement standpoint. I'm sure there's other elements as well, but really starting to build this piece and finding ways that are going to bring your stakeholders in, start the conversation, help them understand what your goals are as a part of a program, as a part of this program, where you're going, what you're going to be measuring. That helps everybody. And then when you send out reports, people will know why that's coming to them and what it all means.
Also, Rochelle, one quick note. Can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, you had mentioned putting things, you know, the measures or the data collection in your contracts with vendors. I have had some struggles with that. And in the last 4 years, I've been working with the vendors with their contracts and also sharing their piece of the work plan. So if it's somebody doing efficiency training, then I show them that section of the work plan, and that tells them straight out exactly what SHIP, you know, is requiring. And I also share their part of the SHIP narrative from the grant that we've written, and that helps them see that. I had some pushback from some, and once I started sharing the actual pieces from the actual grant, then they bought into it. And now that's where the project plan also helped, because I require the project plan to be used with the projects.
Great. Good advice in terms of bringing some of those vendors on board, because I know that can be a challenge. I've definitely heard that from some of the states that I've worked with. Mm-hmm. I've already mentioned this, but in terms of including stakeholders, you know, I recommend that you start including them during your planning, during needs assessments, and then building all of that, your evaluation into that process. I know that stakeholder inclusion can be a challenge. During our last collaborative, no one talked about having stakeholder engagement. Just getting started with that it can be a challenge, but it's a huge opportunity. Is there anyone else who's including stakeholders in your evaluation in particular? Anybody who's got folks on board? All right, so we'll definitely revisit this topic during our one-on-ones, but something to consider, and I think that's something that is often overlooked. I have a couple of resources here if this is something that you want to get started with right away. There's a CDC website that's got great information on this. And then there's a 5-minute YouTube video that I thought was done quite well, just a quickie that gives you some additional information and support too. All right, so now we're going to move to identifying our evaluation priorities, setting goals. This is what ties directly back to the homework that everybody did. And this is to identify your evaluation priorities. What are your evaluation priorities? What do you want to learn? What do stakeholders want to know? What decisions do you want to make? What are the goals that you're working towards as a part of your SHIP program? What are the questions that you're trying to answer as a part of your SHIP evaluation? We talk specifically about what are your SHIP program evaluation priorities? What do you want to learn? What decisions do you want to make? Once you have the evaluation findings, and all of this should tie directly back to your program and your program goals. These were the goals and priorities that came from those of you who responded to these questions. You can see all of the goals and priorities that were identified. Some of this, you can see some folks are really kind of wanting to understand their hospital's needs more. Some have some specific goals that are targeted specifically at the program. Some it's about this relationship building and stakeholder engagement. So it's a whole variety of goals that everybody wants to work towards. And it's really reflective of where everybody's at in the program development and evaluation process. As we move forward, we're going to be focusing on the goals of SHIP, the program goals of SHIP. I know there's a lot of other goals and kind of what you want to try and achieve, and we'll talk about some of those outside of the goals of the SHIP program as a whole when we have our one-on-ones. But as we kind of move forward from here, we're going to talk specifically about the goals of SHIP, because then everything that we build is going to build from that down. We'll start with goals, and then we'll move down to objectives and measures, etc. So these are kind of where everybody's at right now, but we're going to shift a little bit. I know some of you are in this other goal mode, but we're going to shift a little bit to the goals of the SHIP program. This is just kind of a visual of what was reflected in your goals and priority. We've got some at the planning and needs assessment phase. We have some of you who are in the performance management, kind of buy-in, participation, client compliance and outcomes, and then others who are moving towards the impact, achievement, and kind of replicate phase. So we will be talking mainly from the performance management on, but again, when we do our one-on-ones, we can talk a little bit about that planning and needs assessment piece as well. All right, so when we think about goals and program goals specifically, goals are things that provide direction. Where do we want to go? Where are we trying to go? SHIP goals may be towards program management. They may be towards program evaluation. It really kind of depends on where you're at and what you've developed so far. Most of the goals that are in your plans are about improving HCAPS participation, increasing stakeholder knowledge, stakeholder buy-in, increasing program participation, improving program efficiencies, improving cost savings, improving hospital efficiencies, improving quality of care, improving patient satisfaction, increasing alignment with value-based care, increasing participation in ACOs, or increasing participation in shared savings programs. That's really where almost all of SHIP falls. Some of you have a few, somewhat, I'll call them a little bit outlier initiatives that are taking place, but in some way, shape, or form, they tend to fall within one of these SHIP program goals.
That's a really interesting list, in my opinion, because there's different audience, and audience isn't the right word, but there are different people who are involved, like the program efficiencies. That's what our goals focus on. So if we were to measure our goals or objectives, they would be about our SOAR performance with the SHIP grant versus some of these that are more about participation, buy-in, knowledge. Those are more about the process that the hospitals go through. And then you've got the just like your previous slide with the 3 different areas of many of these then actually go to the impact or the effects of the program. So this is super interesting. Thanks for sharing this.
Yeah, well, and, I like that comment because I think that hopefully this kind of shows the, if we look back here at this last slide, you know, some of it really, depending on which one you're talking about, it's going to be in the performance management or in the evaluation area, in terms of where the program is at and how you're developing your program. These all align with what the Federal Office of Rural Health Policy and the SHIP program in general, you know, in terms of what those goals are. All of these align with that. And you do want your program goals to align with that. I think sometimes folks will get off and they'll be thinking about kind of their HR related goals, which are own personal goals or your own office goals. But from where we're thinking about and where we're going, it's what are the program goals, not what are you personally trying to do or what is your office trying to do, but what is your program as a whole trying to do, and taking that kind of a perspective in order to develop your evaluation. And that's why having that stakeholder buy-in really makes such a difference, is because you'll learn more about your program and you'll learn more about what objectives and measures you can actually feasibly expect or build in order to measure program impact. So can we do a quick poll, Kiona? Can we check in from a goals standpoint? Do you think you understand goals? Could you identify, looking at that list, could you identify at least one SHIP goal that fits with your program? Maybe a couple more seconds. We've got 8 of 16, 9. And as we're just waiting for folks to chime in, I know this puts somebody on the spot, but one person said no. Who's the one person? Who doesn't think you can identify a goal?
Oh, that would be me, Rachel.
Hey, Rachel. Okay, hey. Rachel in Mississippi. Oh goodness, Rachel, I can't believe that. I'm surprised.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like, well, I guess I didn't know if there was like a 50-50, but for some of them I can, you know, kind of pick out and tell that, okay, it might fall under this category, but it's not a lot. Maybe just a couple.
Okay, great. Well, it's interesting that you are the person that says you can't identify a ship goal, because as I went through the all of the evaluation materials, your program is the most on track.
Well, I'm glad.
We'll talk about the goal piece, and when we meet one-on-one, we'll revisit this goal piece, but hopefully it'll make more sense once we kind of step back. But you've got a lot of elements in your program already in place. They need some reworking, but you definitely have a lot of elements in place to develop an evaluation.
Yeah, I definitely just don't feel as comfortable knowledge-wise with having a firm grasp on everything. I think I have an idea, but I know it's just part of time and in the process, and just learning. So
yeah, that's great. Good. All right. Well, we'll definitely tackle that. I think that the key with this, it looks like everybody else feels pretty good about it. I think the key is that as you learn more about your program, kind of who's doing what, where, for what reason, is to be just to look at those program priorities that are a part of SHIP, and then look at, you even using this list of goals and identifying what are your program goals based on kind of what you're doing and what you've learned in terms of learning more about your program. Okay, so we're going to move now to objectives. And I'm looking at the slide wondering, that slide was out of order. So if you're not following on the screen, I think it was Carl, if you're not following on the screen, I'm going to the homework 2 as a part of this. So the first homework for today, we're going to have a few homeworks for today, is to go back and look at your SHIP program and look at that list of goals that I just put in front of you. Some of you have already submitted some goals for your program, but look at this new kind of perspective on goals and identify what your SHIP goals are. What is your program trying to achieve as a part of this whole program? Look at that list and then identify your goals. Hopefully they align with your program activities that you're doing, but you may find that they don't. And so that's kind of where you shift into, thinking about some performance management and program changes that may be needed. But definitely, so first step, identifying what those goals are. All right, so now we're going to move from the goals piece and we're moving down a step and we're going to objectives. I believe that as a part of the evaluation process, creating objectives is the most important step. That is my own personal bias. There's nothing scientific to prove that, but I believe it is the most important step. And in terms of thinking about your objectives, the key to the objectives is, have you identify objectives that will help you determine if you have met those goals? So do they align with the goals that you have created that we were just talking about? What meaningful steps do you need to determine if you are reaching your goals? So what are the meaningful steps? How will you know if you've met those goals? What do the stakeholders want to know? And what do you need to know in order to make decisions about your SHIP program as a whole? Creating objectives, it takes time, it takes thought. I do think that this is another place where stakeholder involvement can be really important. Also having other team members on board, because you are going to want to tap into other resources on your team, and including everybody can definitely be helpful. And at the weakest point, or at a minimum, just having other team members review what you've decided. So I'm assuming all of you have heard of SMART objectives. Is that true? Is there anybody on here who have not heard of SMART objectives? All right. There are some programs that focus on SMART goals. I think you start with SMART objectives. There's all different opinions out there in terms of where you want to start, etc. But when you build objectives, if they are SMART, it will definitely help you develop the measures that are going to roll up into these SMART objectives. So SMART objectives they're specific, they're measurable, they're attainable. That attainable piece really ties back to that stakeholder involvement piece. It also ties back to your needs assessment. If you've done any kind of needs assessment and collected any baseline data. And then they're also time sensitive. So you actually know what the time period is that you're trying to achieve what you're trying to achieve. Each goal may have multiple objectives. So when you're building this, you could have maybe 2, 3, 4 objectives that fall underneath that. It really depends on the goal, and it really depends on your program. I have a couple of objectives that are listed here underneath the sample. And then I have some others here. So I went through the tables that many of you submitted. I pulled some of the objectives that were on those tables and listed them on the left-hand side. If any of these on the left-hand side are in your evaluation plan, none of those are SMART objectives. The SMART version or a SMART objective is on the right-hand side. So often what I see when people create objectives is that they tend to be more of activities versus an actual objective. Like, what are you trying to achieve? Why, when, for who, really specific, really measurable, something that's attainable, and something that has a time specified in terms of by when you're going to be doing it. Is the objective piece, is this looking familiar to you in terms of some projects that you've been working on and trying to create SMART objectives for some of the projects that you guys are already working on? Why don't I'll do a call out to somebody. Let's see. How about Stephanie? Stephanie, can you give me an example of a SMART objective?
I'm trying to make sure I unmute everything. Of a SMART objective that I have on my evaluation, or for my SHIP one?
It doesn't have to be on your SHIP. It can just be a SHIP objective that's SMART.
So, oh my God, on the fly, seriously. So, because it has to be specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound, right? So, within the, I don't know how long this learning collaborative is, I can't remember, but within the month of the SHIP evaluation learning collaborative, Stephanie will develop a draft SHIP evaluation plan, specific, measurable, by the end of the learning collaborative. This is so painful. I'm so sorry, you guys. I do not know how to do this any faster. It's so sucky.
It's
I'm
okay.
Sorry.
You've
Way
got
to
the
do
gist.
this to me, Rochelle. I thought we were tight.
You've got the
it's
gist of
better
it.
when somebody volunteers because they've got it. Well, I have to do it for my professional development, and I screw it up every time. So let me just tell you, I've done SMART goals forever, and I've never get them right, but I know what I'm supposed to do. I just can't seem to get it out. I just have to be able to measure it. So I have it time bound because I said by the end of the evaluation Learning Collaborative. I said who, because that's me specifically. Jesus, guys, do you want to help me out? That I'll have a draft one. Is that the way to measure it?
Sure, you'll have a draft evaluation plan.
To share with my bureau chief. What am I missing?
It's okay. I think you basically had all components as you said it over time.
It's just ugly. It's not pretty. Sorry, kids.
So Stephanie will have a draft evaluation plan by the end of the Learning Collaborative. That's your objective.
Thank you for making that a little nicer for me. I apologize on behalf of myself and Idaho to the group.
No pressure. I know it was on the fly. We are, you know, we're all working.
So grateful this is recorded. Yeah, hopefully somebody else listens to that.
Kiana can edit it. Renee, let's just go to you. And these, you know, these are just on the fly to give some examples. I mean, really simple things, even if you don't want it to relate to SHIP. So Kiana, and if somebody wants to put one in the chat box, type it up in the chat box, that might be easier. But Renee in North Carolina, how about you?
I was going to go super simple, and just one of ours is to have all, so 100%, 32 SHIP hospitals participate in the SHIP program this year.
In the current grant year? Was that in the current grant year?
Yes.
And is it all SHIP hospitals, or is it all, did you say all SHIP eligible hospital?
All SHIP eligible.
Okay, there we go. Anybody else who wants to chime in? How about Andrea in Tennessee? You want to add one? We haven't heard from you yet today. Put you on the spot a little bit. I think you're on the call. Yes. Andrea, do you want to chime in? Or Kyle, you want to chime in? And you guys can feel free to put them in the chat box. Oh, you know what? I think Kyle maybe stepped up for, oh no, there she is. Kyle, are you on? She maybe stepped away for a meeting. Well, if anybody has one that you can share, put it in the chat box. It's good for people to see examples, even if they're outside of SHIP. Being able to develop these objectives is huge, because as we move forward, you will see that being able to develop measures ties directly to your ability to create objectives. All right.
Rochelle, so many of these, in my opinion, look like activities with a timeline on them. And when I think back at that list of goals that you presented, you know, I know there were some participation goals, and so some of these fit in to that. But I guess specifically for the more change-related ones, like increasing quality, things like that, I guess these objectives, and maybe that's okay for this purpose, but these really seem like activities with a timeline on them, and not what I historically have thought of as objectives of, I guess I've always thought of objectives in terms of change, like what needs to change in order for the goal to happen. I don't know, I don't want to overcomplicate it, absolutely, but can you just maybe say a little bit about the difference between activities and objectives, given these examples?
So I think it'll be easier to show it as we start talking about measures and the connection between objectives, activities, and measures.
Great. Okay.
Because I think as you're developing your objectives and your whole evaluation plan, a key piece to remember is one objective rarely results in reflecting, you know, that goal. So you're going to have multiple objectives that will reflect whether you are achieving, whether you've achieved, whether you're meeting your goal, all of it should roll up together. And depending on where your program is in terms of activities, that's going to tie directly back to, you know, what the objectives are. So I think it'll make more sense as we kind of roll down further. But you definitely have different activities. So if we look at any one of these, it's not one activity that is the result of this objective. It's actually going to be multiple activities that's going to get you to this objective, just like there are going to be multiple activity or multiple objectives that actually reflect whether you're achieving your goal. All right, so I just want to check in to make sure everybody understands SMART objectives, just this whole specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, time sensitive, so that can you put up the poll again, just to make sure that you can create SMART objectives that relate specifically back to those goals that you identified, that you're going to be identifying as now your second session homework. And if you're unsure, make sure that when we, I'll be able to tell whether you're on the right path when I get the homework from this, and then when we meet one-on-one. So if you're unsure, that's okay. We'll definitely work through this and you'll definitely have SMART objectives by the time we're done. All right, so let's move on. I got a couple of folks in the chat. We got a couple of folks who have put SMART goals in, or SMART objectives into the, so one of the things to keep in mind in terms of your objectives, so Danette included an objective in here, is when you're creating objectives, don't blend two objectives together. Because you want to be able to make sure that you can roll up measures to measure that objective that are specific to that. So make sure that when you're doing your objectives, you want one concept within the objectives, and it's better than just have two objectives. So submit HCAPs and improve scores are completely different concepts. So make sure you just split those apart. All right, we are going to move on from objectives, and this is your homework 2 that goes right along with that goal that you're going to create. So you're going to create the goal, and then from that goal, you can have a couple of goals depending on how you want to, you know, how much work you want to do on this, but identify what your goal is. And then underneath that goal, you're going to identify what those objectives are as a part of that goal. And you're going to determine what kind of format. I don't use TrueServe. I know I used to use TrueServe, and I haven't used it in a while, and I know they've been developing it. So I don't know if there's a capability to, you know, develop anything in TrueServe, but if there is, that's a place to do it. I know some folks like to use Word, and they like to use a Word doc to do it. Some like to use Excel. You know, put it in a format that makes sense for you. Whatever. An important piece in terms of building your evaluation is the fact that you want to be able to share it, and you want to make sure that other people in your office can use it and tap into it as well. So making sure that you're using a product that can be used by other folks in your office is definitely really important. Once you've created this, you are going to then send this to me. This is your homework. This is your second piece of homework. So I want to see the goal, and then I want to see the objectives that you have indicated underneath that particular goal. I saw something pop up in the chat box. So there are a couple, so let's see. There's a couple of questions in here. Somebody asked if I will respond to the questions before the end of the call. Will you ask the questions? I'm trying to figure out who the person is who made that comment. So somebody in the chat box asked if I would respond to the questions in the chat box before the end of the call.
Rochelle, I think they might be asking about that example of by the end of the grant year, 100% of hospitals coding based on ICD-10 will report a minimum of 25% increase of claims paid. Maybe they're asking, is that an appropriate goal or objective? I don't know. That's what it seems like.
Sarah, it was you who had asked that. So
hear me?
There you go.
Hi, thanks. Yeah, I just wanted to, before we got off the call and did our homework and stuff, I just wanted to make sure, you know, I understood that I threw that example out there and I didn't know if that was an appropriate goal or an appropriate objective or if I was on the right track or like you said, or if I was mixing two together like you were saying earlier. So I just wanted to ask you that before we got off the call so that we are on the right track.
So, and can you remind me, let's see, I see on here, the first one is by the end of the grant year, 100% of hospitals coding based on ICD-10 will report a minimum of a 25% increase of claims paid. That is not your goal. Your goal is what, in terms of doing this coding, I'm assuming this is coding training that you're talking about?
Yes, correct.
All right, so your goal is going to be something bigger that you're trying to reach towards, and what you've put in here is your objective.
Okay, okay, that's what I was wondering. I didn't know if I was getting them mixed up. You know, when you said objective, I put it in as objective, and then I thought, oh, well, maybe that's my goal.
Yeah, no,
okay.
Your goal is going to align more with what the SHIP program goals are, and then within that, underneath that goal, you're going to have maybe, you know, could be a couple, depending on, you know, how much effort you have, a number of objectives that you're going to put in place to reach that goal. And then below that, you're going to have activities and measures to determine whether you've actually hit that 100% and that 20% increase in claims paid.
Perfect. Okay.
Does that make sense?
It does. You know, I put it in there during the objective discussion, but then when I was writing it, I thought, oh, well, maybe that's my goal. But I get it. The goals are pretty much outlined for us with the activities, and then we're really developing our objectives associated with those goals and those activities.
Right, exactly. And Andrea, yes, Andrea is trying to decrease soda consumption. So for example, a goal may be improved health and wellness, and her objective is I will decrease soda consumption from 2 cans per day to 1 can per day. Awesome. All right, so you're gonna organize this, send it to me. We've got about 4 more minutes left today. We have time to begin to deep. We're gonna, because of time, because I love to spend the last session really sharing, we're gonna step into measures. We may not get all the way through measures. We've only got 4 minutes, but we are gonna, I do wanna move ahead because then we can really dedicate our time to sharing and kind of talking about the last phases of evaluation. So the next piece we're going to talk about is creating measures. And Penny, this is kind of another step in that process that you asked about, but a lot about it is, you know, what can you measure? What data do you have access to collect in order to do measurement? Identifying measures that in order to meet your objectives. The measures are going to tie directly to your activities. They really should. And they tie directly to your process, your outputs, and to your outcomes. From a measurement standpoint, performance measurement is the step that comes before your ability to do performance management, because if you don't have the measurement data, it's very difficult to manage because you don't know really what's happening in your program. And if you are collecting measurement data for inputs, process, outputs, and outcomes, and you're going to decide what, you know, of those which are going to be your priorities, then you can use that for decision making, but also for reporting and evaluation purposes. There are differences between the different types of measures that you can use when you're thinking about your program. There are input measures, there's process measures, there's output measures, and there's outcome measures. These are all different. Input measures are, you know, what are you using to actually do your program? The money, the people, the programs, FTEs, your partners, etc. Process measures are all about operational function. A lot of you are trying to measure whether you're actually doing these operational pieces in a timely fashion, whether you're getting participation, etc. That is all about the process, the time it takes to complete the process and to administer the grant. Then you've got the output measures, which a lot of you also focus on. How many participated, how many projects were done, how many staff were trained, how many workshops were held. All of that falls under the output measure category. And then there's the outcome measure, which is very different from output and process measures. Outcome measures are the consequence, anything that can be attributed back to that in terms of change. So this has all to do with something has changed, not who participated, but what changed. So HCAP score, the quality of care, whether payment models were adapted, whether community programs were developed, and what happened through that. ICD-10 improvements. Adopting lean, establishing a patient experience team, something that is changing and not kind of counting things or improving the actual internal function operations of the program. So when you're thinking about measures that you're developing, you're going to be thinking about them between all of these different areas. And oftentimes programs are going to start on the process side, because in order to get stakeholder engagement and really get things off the ground, you really need to have a good streamlined process, and then they'll move to output and outcome measures. But it depends. It depends on, you know, where your program is at in the development process, with what knowledge and data you already have, and what kind of priority you have. The other thing to remember is when you're doing your evaluation, make sure that you are knowing that, you know, you don't have to do everything at once. It's better to have a good evaluation in some areas than to have no evaluation and no data being collected across, you know, everything. So you've got so limited that you actually know nothing about your program, and you're just kind of collecting data for the purpose of collecting data. That's something we want to get away from. And it's actually something that we talk to our hospitals about all the time is, you know, collect data to use it. Don't collect data just to collect data. The other thing to think about is are you trying to measure your process or the outcomes? And then are you trying to to collect data and tell your story over time, or are you trying to tell your story after the fact? I highly recommend that you build all of your evaluation activities into your program so that you can tell your story as you go along. So using what we call a formative process versus trying to collect all the data on the back end and then trying to describe your story after everything is done. It really depends on what works best for you and your staffing. But if you can build program evaluation activities right into your program activities, it's going to be more seamless and you'll have the data when you need it. So this is going to be our last slide today before we close here. We're 2 minutes over, but I do want to show you this because it kind of wraps everything up. It includes the goals, which we talked about on the front end. It includes the objectives that we talked about. It includes activities, which are samples right from revised samples from within some of your applications that you submitted. It includes output, process, outcome, and impact measures. So across all of those areas that we were talking about. And it ties all of those pieces together. This is the type of thing that we want to be able to have at the beginning of our next session that we have together so that we can share and kind of talk about all of the different goals that each one of your programs have, the objectives that you've set for yourself, your measures that you've established that align directly with some of your activities. In some instances, as you develop this, you may find that you're going to make maybe some things up. My point of this is for you to really understand how to put together your evaluation, not to have the exact evaluation that lines up with current program activities. You're going to have to go back and work on some of that with your team as a whole. I just want you to feel comfortable that you can walk away with something concrete to really get your evaluation plan off the ground, regardless of the activities that you're actually implementing and whether you're doing it through a contract and cohort or you're doing it through individual grants with your hospitals. All right, it looks like the vast majority of you think that you can do the create measures. One of you says no. So the person who says no, if you want to email me, that would be really helpful. Just email me on the side. And also the person who says unsure, because I'll connect back with you directly. I'm just going to end that polling quick. I'll just share the results so you guys can all see it quick. And then I'm going to end here with the last piece. You're going to get these slides, so you're going to be able to see this, but this is kind of an evaluation format that you might want to use as you're developing this. But this is your kind of final summary of all the homework. It's to identify your goal, create some SMART objectives for that goal, and then include your measures. I actually put objectives in there, but I actually want you to create the measures. Oh, it is, that reflect those SMART objectives. Sorry, just had a little brain fart. And then I'm going to be reaching out to you individually to set up a time. I'm going to send a mass email out to everybody. We'll figure out a time that works for you so that we can meet one-on-one. And we're actually going to walk through your plan with you as a part of this collaborative. Does anybody have any questions before we close today?
Rochelle, this is Sally. Hi, everyone. I was just going to add, since we review the work plans and many of you submit evaluation plans, I think what we see often is some work plans and measures are all around the grant administration, so what the SOAR does. So those do tend to be more process measures, and it's important that you are working towards having program measures or objectives, but it's fine to have a mix, because you know your role as SOARs is administering the SHIP program, but we're cognizant that if it's a state with 100 hospitals and the funds are given directly to the hospital, you're not doing statewide or contractor activities, it could be very difficult to assess a measure across 50 hospitals and go in and see if, you know, if half of your hospitals are PPS, so they're not even in an MB-QIP report, you know, did a certain quality measure go up? So I think Rochelle has a great sense of that as she works with you one-on-one, of looking at your program and how you administer it, and a good balance of making sure you're, you have goals and appropriate objectives for program management to make sure you're successful, but also in terms of reaching more the SHIP category program goals, and whether you're doing that as network activities, consortium, or individual.
Great. Thank you so much, Sally. Yeah, that's exactly. I mean, I couldn't have said it better in terms of kind of what the strategy is that we'll use as we look at this together. But most definitely, you know, really being able to kind of push to that next level, but also I'm very aware of the program management responsibilities. So we'll make sure that we take that into serious consideration as we develop this. So don't feel like it's going to be the most burdensome thing on the planet. My goal is to try and make your job easier, and also for you to have ways to measure, but also improve your program as a team. Any other questions before we close today? Anything else, Kiona, on your end that you need to share?
Nope, I don't have anything on my end. You guys can just look for a communication within the next few days of the recording and all these resources and the homework assignment outlined as well.
Terrific. Well, thanks everybody for joining us today. Sorry for going over. That is well, that's a performance improvement issue on my end, but thank you so much for staying with us today. And I hope you guys have a great afternoon. Stay safe. And we'll be in touch with you. So just look for my email, and we'll find a time to meet one-on-one and continue to move forward. Otherwise, I'll talk to all of you again next week, I believe, same time on Wednesday, correct, Kiona?
Yep, that's correct.
Awesome. Bye, everybody. Have a great day. Thank you so much.
Bye. Thank you.